Hi, I'm Alec from AUTOSUGGEST, and I'm here with Milky to talk about some music. I'm a failed drumming student of about when I was 11 or 12 years old. Then when I was 18, I heard Joy Division, and I thought this must be obviously the best thing ever. And I started stealing my brother's guitars to do a sort of post-punk band. And when that band didn't work out because I was too much of a control freak, the keyboard player taught me how to use Ableton. And so I started AUTOSUGGEST as a sort of solo electronic project. And it's kind of mutated from there into a sort of faux new wave, faux new pop alternative thing. These singles that we've done so far are from an album called Every Kind of You, which is sort of all written around a very brief but kind of an emotional palate cleanser that I had with someone. And they all sort of focus around trying to make the most out of a situation where there's an end in sight, and exploring more that feeling of a kind of emotional looseness and a complete lack of anxiety and just being in the moment, a kind of presentness that I didn't think I had before. It Won't Come Back, the first single from the album, that was about basically the end of that experience where I had developed obviously quite strong feelings about the person, and it's about that idea of trying to convince someone that, yeah, I've got feelings, but it's fine, like we can just go back to normal, it won't come back. And I think the song kind of has become a lot more of a ironic thing, in that if you're at the point of singing a love song saying it won't come back, it's probably come back, and it's probably going to stick around for a while. And with the second single, Call Home, that is kind of that first feeling of being totally enraptured with someone, and the sort of pact that you make with yourself that I can do this, I can go far to give you sort of the emotional thing that I think both you and I can have. And I'm not going to overextend myself so much that I'm, out to sea without any kind of way of getting back. Well, mainly I don't like drummers, which is a half joke, but I think you can tell my sincerity is there. But yeah, I think there's plenty of rock bands, and particularly in Australia, there's plenty of rock bands that are doing, the 4-piece, 5-piece kind of 2 guitars, singer, bassist, drums, whatever. And they do it quite well. I didn't really care to contribute to that scene. I just don't think it's... we don't need another sort of white man yelling on guitar with the same sort of... It's fine. We can move on. So, but what I was interested in particular was textural explorations that kind of are impossible without the use of computers, without the use of synthesizers. And for me, I was kind of, my sort of musical heroes were New Order, Depeche Mode, INXS. And they didn't really care to, not play around with these things and introduce textures that, it helps you elevate your music to a level that's not just, basic rock music. So yeah, it was just more interesting and more playful. And I think these days with the tools that artists have, it's kind of silly not to try. So I'm still trying. This collection of songs kind of just came over the course of a couple of months, early this year in 2021. And it was just, I think with the previous album that we did this year, Intrahedonism, that was very much a focused sort of direct blast of, we wanted really raunchy sort of distorted textures, but we wanted it to be really rhythmic and have a lot of kind of pop energy to it. This one was a lot more just like, I am reeling from missing someone, and I need to just get this thing out. And what we ended up with was a kind of collection of very like wistful, very minimal like demos. It almost sounded like early Cure stuff. It was too much like that. It was like early Cure or early Stroke stuff. And so then after sort of that kind of exhuming of all that emotional content, it became about, all right, well, how does this work as an AUTOSUGGEST record, which has that kind of, I think, a considered slickness to the sound. The emotional core stayed the same. I think what changed is that we kind of just kept going grander and grander with the textures, and it's like, how sort of much can we emphasize that core emotion with actual, musical arrangements and production techniques. The lockdown in Sydney in particular shook it up, because I think it probably would have ended up more of a different record if it wasn't that I had written all the songs. I couldn't get anyone else in for the production, so it was just me sitting in this room kind of just adding more and more little things and more little textures and trying to just work every ounce of these kind of much more personal stories into these kind of more extravagant arrangements. So I think there's almost a bombasticness that's there now that I didn't really expect for it to have at the start. I had nothing better to do. I just didn't have anything better to do. And as well, like we had finished Intrahedonism towards sort of the end of last year. And then I met this person, had this kind of like very brief whirlwind thing, then sort of started kind of going back into my old sort of more rascal behavior throughout the sort of transition into 2021. But I kept coming back to this feeling. I kept coming back to this kind of much more emotional kind of sound. And there was just kind of no choice. It had to be explored, and we ended up here. And Sexty, the guitarist, he ended up liking it. I showed it to all the usual people I show, and they were like, "This is fantastic." And I was like, "All right, well, that's an album. Then let's do an album again." I think when you can't play shows, there's no reason not to keep writing. The main line is like, "Home, get me close. Can't you see that I'd wade through it all? When I'm lost, when I'm lost, it won't be until I can call home." The whole second half of the song is just that line repeated over and over again, but it's sung in different ways. And it's kind of, it starts as if it's directing it to the sort of subject, the person. Over time, as it keeps going and as the music keeps ramping up, it almost feels like the texture and the tone kind of shifts, as if it's questioning myself, like, who am I trying to convince here that this is the right thing, that this is the thing that's meant to be? I think that idea of trying to convince yourself one thing when reality is another is definitely one of the stronger themes on this new record. That's a good question. I think of those kind of like impressionistic paintings of kind of rural places that I think people in the city quite, they could be by any sort of impressionist painter, but like, like a Monet or something like that. But in particular, the context of an artwork like that from an urban viewer, in that it's this thing that, yes, it does technically exist in reality, but it's more about what's in your head and what it means to you in your head. It's an interesting dynamic, I think. Well, the first two singles that we did, they're sequential in terms of, well, actually we did the second song first, and the first song is one that's coming up, is going to be like the opener on the album. There's a track called Take Your Shape, which is just essentially the sort of more raunchy dance number on the record. So it's like, we can be, attentive and soft, and we can also be doing big Prince blasty sort of synth pads and gnarly little guitar solos and have fun. So we're going to be touring, I believe, all of the East Coast here at least, next February and March. We may play shows before then, but that's just a matter of if people ask us to. And what does an AUTOSUGGEST live set look like? Well, we usually take along a bunch of lighting equipment that's actually synced to all the electronics that we play alongside. This is the benefit of not having a drummer in your band, is that you have room for bags of lights. And so it's this kind of big, frantic kind of, it leans heavy into the vibe of the songs, and no matter where you are, you can get a little bit of strobe in your face if that's what you want. It's catharsis both if you're viewing it or if you're playing it. I mean, I think the only time that my mind ever shuts up is if I'm on a stage kind of doing the thing, because there's so many things to just kind of do in terms of muscle memory or just kind of instinct that you kind of think about, the future. You can only be present. And I think a good live act as a participant will take you there with them. Well, TikTok, ironically, this whole thing, so like a lot of the band's success has come from learning how to use social media now. We had kind of producers that I admire and other artists that I admire on our side quite early on. We were very lucky that we got cool people that were just like, this is nice. But we never really had an audience, like a proper audience, people that like just will buy anything that you put out in terms of like merch or just really emotionally respond to anything that you make. But since we did social media the right way, and mainly that comes from TikTok, which ironically, the person that a lot of this music of this record has been written about introduced me to TikTok. So it's this weird thing of being inducted into what I think is kind of a more raw form of the internet again, and then relearning all those skills of like how memes work, like how people participate in just batshit insane discussions, and learning how to present yourself in this kind of just hyper focused, or in realistic terms, hyper unfocused kind of audience that is just simply trying to burn through time. As you can probably be aware of, I do never shut the fuck up. And one of that's as a skill is useful for TikTok because I can talk for 15 seconds about pretty much anything. So I just decided I'd start basically like a kind of like video playlist of where I just, whenever I add a song to the playlist, I talk about it for 15 seconds. As it turns out, I think a lot of Gen Z, I guess I'm a late. I'm a young millennial. Yeah. Anyway, but there was a room for someone to sort of calmly tell you about Interpol on TikTok, and I filled that void. And it's been this amazing thing of where I think because I'm sort of half decent at expressing sort of, I guess, more abstract ideas, people could see why I value the music that I like. And then when you start talking about things that you like and what you make, there's already kind of a familiarity there, and that's just carried over to the band. And now we just we're sending records all over the world. We're getting very strange messages on Instagram, and everything is improving. So it's a bit of a game changer. New Order. Actually, you know what? The answer to that would have been Sophie, but that obviously can't happen anymore. But aside from that, I'd say Peter Hook from New Order. Unknown Pleasures. Raunchy, emotive, electronic, dash rock. My song. I would like to score a recreation of Mad Men, but in the 1980s. Miley Cyrus. I used to do sort of an in excess pantomime for my mum when I was probably about 4. I'm going to say it's probably going to be like maybe New Sensation Maybe? I don't know. It would have been like a hardcore punk yard show, tagging along with my brother. Seb DeLisa at the Oxford Art Factory. David Bowie the next day, with my own money, that is. I'd rather be a Spice Girl, probably. The first thing that came to my head was Depressed Spice. At Hudson Ballroom, aka Good God, aka Plan B, with Lupa J and Marcus Whale. That was both people I definitely like looked up to, and it was our kind of Sydney show back after like a very miniature tour where we had done our lighting show for the first time, and we did it there with 2 different smoke machines for some reason. So we were just ensconced in smoke. We had like this projector doing things around me, and there was just crazy lights. And I remember coming out of the bathroom after the set because I was just exhausted, and Marcus Well just gave me the biggest bear hug ever, and he was like, "That was great." And I was just like, "Fuck, this is this is it's going to be hard to match this level of community-based approval again." You know, I used to say that there are no such thing as guilty pleasures, but I now know the answer is Drake. Cub Sport. If we're being realistic, it's probably Lil Nas X. Please calm down. I put in a Smith song into Pandora Radio, and it gave me back Transmission by Joy Division, and I pretty much felt that one in my spine.